Morning to one and all present here. I'm Ramya Devi working as Assistant Professor in SNS College of Engineering. So in this video I'm going to share a small article regarding web servers. So what is a web server? A web server is nothing but a server software or a hardware that runs on websites. So it communicates with the web browser using the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, the HTTP, which is a widely and commonly used protocol in an internet. So here the features of a web server should be, it should be able to accept HTTP requests from a web client and return an appropriate resource or a response through an HTTP response. So this involves a various number of steps in the web servers. So the first step is server calls on TCP software and waits for connection request. Upon receiving, server dedicates a subtask to handling this connection. So the subtask establishes TCP connection and receives an HTTP request, so which examines host header field and invokes software for this host. And also it maps the resource on the server. So if the resource is a file, it creates a file as a response, and if the resource is an image, it creates an image as a response. If the resource is a program, it returns the output of the program and also the logs information. And also the client initiates a connection close and the web server closes the connection between the client and the server. So a web server can host a single website or multiple websites using the same software and hardware resources, which is also known as a virtual hosting. So this is the history behind the web server. So the first web server is HTTPD, which has been established in 1990, and next is the Apache server 1995, MSIAS and Tomcat. So Tomcat Apache server is a widely used web servers nowadays. So this is the servlet container which provides the Java virtual machine that runs the Java program known as a servlet. So the configuration and the tuning parameters of a server should be, the server configuration has been divided into two types. So one is the external communication and the other one is the internal processing. So the server will be configured for external communication, like when a web client is accessing a web server, so how it should be connected. So the connection parameters of a web server configuration, and whenever an HTTP request has been arrived to a web server, how an internal processing of the request should be done. So for that the server should be configured for the internal processing. So in the Tomcat, Quiet parameters is used for HTTP for external communication, and Catalina is used for the actual servlet container. Quiet parameters, so it affects the external communications, IP addresses and TCP ports, number of subtasks during server initialization, maximum number of threads, maximum number of TCP connection requests in a queue, and then the connection timeout seconds. So next, the tuning of the server. It changes the values to optimize performance, simulate using load generations or stress test tool. So this is the Catalina parameters for internal processing, which affects the functionality. So which clients may send HTTP requests to the server, and which virtual hosts are listening for TCP connections on a given port, and what logging will be performed, how the path portion of request URIs will be mapped to the server's file system or other R resources, whether or not the server's resources will be password protected or not. So the server components behind is connector, host, logger, realm and valve. So first we will see the connector component, so in which the connector component contains the accept count of the connector from the web client to the server, connection timeout, IP address, port number, how many spare threads to be used, maximum threads and maximum spare threads. And next is your virtual host. So whenever an web application, any website component that performs some function for the web users, for example online forms, shopping carts, word processors, spreadsheets, video and photo editing, file conversion, scanning and programs. Next is the Tomcat context component, represents the web applications. The context path specifies whether the application's resources can be located. Applications can either be stored as an WAR file, web application archive, or as organized unpacked resources. Next is the logging component. So web server logs record information about server activity, page views, errors, access log performed by Valve component. So next is the remote host name, logical username, user, data and time, start line of the HTTP request, HTTP status code of the response. And next is the access control. There are two-stage process. The one is the database of usernames with password and a list of roles like administrator, developer, end user. And other one is the certain resources can only be accessed by the users who belong to certain roles. So access control service by realm component, admin role is required to run the Tomcat administration tool. And how to secure the servers. So the servers can be attacked by eavesdropping or man in the middle attack. So we use a secure socket layer for protecting our web servers. So to enable the secure server Tomcat features, we have to do two things. One, we have to obtain and install a certificate. The next one, we have to configure the server to listen for the transport layer security and also the connections on the SUM port. Thank you.